but I'm here now, and we're reading chapter 34 called Flight. In chapter 33, called The Wager, Domnu and Emerus started playing chess, and Emerus gave Domnu the Galator in exchange for her sending him and Shim to the Shrouded Castle to try to save Rhea, under the caveat that if Emerus survived, then if he ever came back, she would have to give the Galator back. So that's where we're at. And she shrunk him and Shim down so that they could ride on the back of Trouble, who they got back. He's okay. So that's really good. Okay, so flight. Flying through the darkness, I wrapped my arms tightly around Trouble's neck. By the angle of the bird's back, I could tell that we were steadily gaining altitude. In one hand I held my staff, now almost as small as myself. I wondered where Shim might be at this moment, hoping that he was at least safe. Chilled air flowed over us, so strongly that my sightless eyes began to water, sending thin streams of tears across my cheeks and over my ears. Neck feathers quivered with every gust, brushing against my face and hands. Being no larger than Trouble's own head, I realized that the hawk's feathers were much more than the soft, fluffy plumage they had once seemed. Each quill combined the flexibility of a branch with the sturdiness of a bone. Gradually, the motions of the body bearing me became my own. With every upstroke of the powerful wings, I inhaled. With every downstroke, I exhaled. I could feel Trouble's shoulder and back muscles tense before each beat, then spring into action with startling strength. As we flew, I listened with all my concentration to hear whatever I could in the blackness. I felt surprised to realize how little sound the beating wings themselves made. Only a quiet whoosh of air accompanied every downstroke, the barest creak of shoulder bones every upstroke. For the first time in my life, I tasted the freedom of flight. The surrounding darkness only enhanced my sensation of soaring without limits, without boundaries. Wind in my face, I caught at least a hint of the sublime experience that the people of Vinkyra had once known, then lost, an experience that I recalled not in my mind, but in my bones. The wind shifted, and I heard a faint whimpering coming from below the talons. I realized that Trouble was also carrying another passenger, just as on a different day the hawk might carry a field mouse. And I knew that Shim, now littler than little, must be just as distraught as a mouse about to be eaten. I tried to stretch my second sight to the limit and beyond, to push back the darkness that seemed to thicken as we progressed. Yet I felt the limits of my vision more than its gifts. The castle's shroud poured over the dark hills. It enveloped them just as it did the three of us, for we were flying into the land, as Rhea once put it, where the night never ends. With effort, I sensed some of the contours of the hills rising below. No trees dotted this terrain, no rivers creased its slopes. At one point I felt the land fall away into a steep but narrow canyon, and I heard the faint cry of what might have been an eagle. To the north, a dense group of flaming torches mingled with the raspy shouts of goblins, and to the south, eerie lights flickered that chilled me deeper than the wind. On the slope above the canyon, I detected a few clusters of buildings, which once had been villages. A strange, uncertain yearning arose in me. Might I, as a young child, have lived in one of those villages? If I could somehow view this land in the light, would it bring back a little of my lost memory? But the villages below were as dark and silent as my own childhood. No fires burned at any hearths, no voices lifted in any squares. I doubted that any laborers like Han still toiled away in this terrain, as their ancestors had for centuries before the rise of Stangmar and the onset of never-ending darkness. It was even less likely that any gardeners could have survived in such a place. For the land of Talayan and Garlotha at least still clung to twilight, while the lands below existed in permanent eclipse. The darkness deepened, pressing against us like a heavy blanket. I felt Trouble's rapid heartbeat, pulsing through the veins of the bird's neck. At the same time, the beating of the wings slowed down just a notch, as if the darkness inhibited flight in the same way that it inhibited vision. The Merlin leveled off. More and more his wings faltered, sometimes not completing a stroke, other times missing a stroke entirely. As the cold winds gusted, he weaved unsteadily, his head cocked to one side and then the other. He seemed confused, trying to see what could not be seen. He struggled to stay on course. I clutched my feathered steed. If Trouble was having such difficulty seeing, how could he possibly guide us safely into the ever-spinning castle? Perhaps that was the point of Domnu's final warning, that getting near the castle would be less difficult than getting inside it. With a slap of fear, I realized that our only hope now lay in my own second sight. I, whose own eyes were blind, must somehow see for the hawk. Although my second sight had always grown weaker as the light around me faded, I could not let that happen this time. Perhaps second sight did not require light after all. Perhaps I could see despite the darkness. I summoned all of my energy. I must try to pierce the darkness. Minutes passed. I could sense nothing different. And why should I? I had never before been able to see at night, even when my eyes functioned. What made me think I could change that now? Yet I continued to try, to probe with my mind's eye, to see beyond the grays, beyond the shadows, to fill in the swaths of darkness, just as Rhea showed me how to fill in the empty places between the stars. Meanwhile, Trouble's flight grew more erratic and uneven. His wings labored as the fierce winds buffeted us. The bird hesitated, changed direction, hesitated again. So very gradually that I myself did not at first notice the shift. I began to sense wispy images through the thickening darkness. A curve in a ridge, a depression that might have once been a lake, a twisting road, an uneven line that could only be a wall of stone. Then, in the deep distance, I detected something odd. A vague, throbbing glimmer on the far ridge. It seemed to be both moving and stationary, both light and dark. I was not even certain that it really existed. Firmly, sinking my arms deep into his feathery neck, I turned Trouble's head toward the spot. The bird resisted at first, then started to shift the angle of his wings. Slowly, he changed direction. In time, I detected a structure of some kind, mammoth in size. It rose from a high hill like a black ghost of the night. I thought I could see strange rings of light on its sides, and some sort of pinnacles at its top. As foreboding as Domnu's lair had felt, this structure felt 100 times worse. Still, pushing firmly on Trouble's neck, I guided us closer. By now, Trouble not only accepted my steering, but almost seemed heartened by it. The wings beat with renewed strength. I reached farther and farther with my second sight. Now I could see the flat hilltops scattered with stones, where the strange structure sat. Yet even as the land surrounding it became clearer, the structure itself remained blurred. A low, rumbling sound swelled as we approached, a sound like stone grinding against stone. At once I understood. The structure was slowly turning on its foundation. We had found the shrouded castle. Biting my lip in concentration, I steered the hawk to fly in a circle around the revolving castle. The blurred outlines immediately sharpened. The pinnacles revealed themselves as towers, the rings of light as torches seen through the spinning windows and archways. Every so often, within the torchlit rooms, I glimpsed soldiers wearing the same pointed helmets as the warrior goblins. I focused my vision on one lower window where no soldiers seemed to be present. Then I guided Trouble into a dive. We aimed straight at the window. The battlements, the towers, the archway drew near. Suddenly I realized that we were flying too slow, dropping too far. We were going to hit the wall. Across my mind flashed the terrifying dream I had experienced at sea. I pulled with all my might, forcing the hawk to veer sharply upward. Shim, clasped in the talons, screamed. We whizzed past the battlements, barely above the stones. In another split second we would have crashed. Refocusing, I brought Trouble around again. This time, as we circled the castle, I tried to gauge our relative speeds more closely, yet I faltered. The truth was, I had no eyes, no real vision. Did I dare try again, guided only by my second sight? I sucked in my breath, then urged the hawk into another dive. We shot down toward the same open window as before. Wind tore at me, screaming in my ears. As the window neared, my stomach tightened like a fist. Even the slightest error would send us smashing into the wall. Our speed accelerated. We could not turn back now. We tore through the window. In the same instant, I saw a stone column straight ahead. Leaning hard, I caused Treble to swing left. We brushed past the column, slid across the floor, and slammed into a wall somewhere in the bowels of the shrouded castle. Uh-oh! Okay, so we've made it to this mysterious, spinning, shrouded castle. I think we only have 4 chapters left. So 4 more days, and we will finish up with the first book in the series. Pretty crazy. So join me tomorrow for chapter 35, and I will start reading at about 9 p.m. Pacific time. Thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful night.